Firefighters of Reddit, what's the dumbest person you had to save in a stupid situation? Dumbass tried to cross a raging river in 0-degree weather about a 300-foot span on a snowmobile. He lived but didn't make the crossing and the machine was recovered days later. I once had a firefighter tell me he almost died in a house fire while going back into the house to look for the owner. A neighbor was concerned about why the firefighter was still in the residence, so he asked another firefighter. This is about how the exchange went. Neighbor: why is that fireman still in the house? Firefighter: he's looking for the owner of the home. Neighbor: he is right over there with the video camera. Turns out the owner did not think it was important to alert the fire department he was out of the house. Instead, he was just taking video of the whole event. Fire started because the owner had tried to smother his barbecue cooker flame with leftover wood from the siding that had been installed on his home. The owner did not realize it would burned his whole house down. I'm not a firefighter, but I used to do a lot of disaster response work. Hurricane Floyd, Eastern North Carolina. I had a farmer with a large family that refused to evacuate his house. Stubborn bastard. River had broke loose, floodwaters were coming up fast, and the police had given up on changing his mind. I drove my truck right up into his yard, rolled down the window and asked him to dress his kids in something orange or bright yellow. He asked me why and I said so body recovery will be able to distinguish them from all the dead pigs floating around. He told me to fuck off, but 5 minutes later he had the whole family in the vehicle and they got the hell out. We needed to close the main connection through a forest over the winter because the trees were falling faster on the road than we could remove them due to way too much snow falling. Also, the redirection was more than an hour longer due to the snow. Some cars thought that they would come through but turned around as soon as they saw the trees on the road. One semi also thought he'd get through. He drove up to the trees and called the fire brigade and complained why we didn't remove the trees. As he was calling, a bunch of trees behind him also fell, locking him in. It stood the 1 month before the trees and the snow could get removed by us that at least the semi can back out. We needed another month until the road was free again. Where da fuck do you live? Because I'm pretty sure nature is telling y'all to leave. Former firefighter EMT. Easily the dumbest person I encountered was a mother of 4 who decided it would be an awesome idea to get a Facebook/Instagram worthy picture of her kids, all under age 10, sitting in a rowboat. Mother untied it from the dock and thought she'd just pull them back with the rope that she forgot to hold on to. They floated a half-mile down the river before the 2 oldest boys managed to grab a branch hanging over the bank. It was really surreal to see 4 young kids, all in matching clothing, sitting in a boat waiting to be rescued. I have no clue what happened after, but they were physically fine, just scared. A little tired, but the mom was in full-blown panic mode and kept getting in our way. I hope she's making better choices now. I was called to a home to get a pie out of the oven before it caught fire. The lady went to the store and was delayed for some reason. She called 911 to have the fire department take the pie out of the oven and place it on the stove. The call came in as something stuck in oven and unable to turn off stove. Still number 1 call in 32 years, smile. I was a Navy corpsman, so this one is probably a bit of a reach, but whatevs. Marine comes to sick call with a seriously beaten up dick, like lacerations, bruising. Thing was really fucked up. Asked him what he did and he insisted that what happened was that he had a surprise boner and it hit his zipped up pants zipper and basically went all garbage disposal on his junk. Dude would not drop this narrative no matter how many times we told him that this just doesn't happen. Finally, Doc, the actual MD, comes in and tells him enough of this shit, yada yada, write him up for malingering, need the full story. Dude jammed his wiener into the back of a computer tower. According to him, there was an opening back there, probably because old PC towers in the Navy routinely had shit swapped out and they didn't always cover openings when things were removed. So, because he was a fucking donkey, he stuck his finger in it and felt a light tingling sensation as his skin made contact with something electrical. So he took the next logical step and whipped out his dick and shoved it into the back of this computer. What he did not account for was that the opening had sharp metal edges. But once inside, He got that ding-a-ling feeling, and so he felt like he might as well finish the job before he pulled out. Plus, and this is where I had to stop myself from laughing, he felt it was smarter to pull himself out flaccid rather than hard. Taps forehead. This was not a young man. This was not a man without rank. And hashtag X200B, edit, I wear this gold and silver as badges of shame for the shit I've seen. Years ago we had this call straight out of Caddyshack. Some guy had gotten tired of this gopher ruining his yard. Little did he know though he was facing the Sun Tzu of gophers. The homeowner, dwelling upon his experience from Vietnam, decided that the best way to deal with the gopher was to treat the situation like a VC tunnel. In lieu of a frag grenade he poured a 5-gallon can of gasoline down the gopher hole, waited with a varmint gun, and lit it off. The ensuing explosion caused a small crater to form in his yard. I'm still thoroughly impressed that there was a proper fuel-to-air ratio in the network of tunnels that allowed for such an explosion to happen. However, the gopher refused to surrender without a fight. The gopher ran out of the hole engulfed in flames, causing the guy's yard to catch on fire. The gopher sprinted into the guy's shed still on fire and burrowed into a void space in the wall, where he died. Like the martyr perk from Modern Warfare, his still flaming remains set the inside of the wall on fire as well as several flammables. In the end the guy's backyard was ruined and about a quarter of his shed burned down, taking out a bunch of power tools and a zero-turn mower. He definitely would have saved a few $1,000s if he had hired an exterminator. This reminds me of my dad. Hated fire ants. Always had gasoline around to clean the grease, you know. Well, he would get bit by an ant and the fight was on. Gasoline fetched and poured onto the mound, promptly lit, and the ensuing commentary delivered, "Yappin', I'll show the ants fire." It wasn't really his fault, but we had an old guy in a nursing home get his balls stuck in a shower chair. A motorist had a bad alternator and the car died while he was driving. The electric lock control stopped working. We were dispatched for a person trapped in a motor vehicle. On arrival, the advice was given to manually lift the lock knob. You can easily tell the ones who will not survive the first 24 hours of the zombie apocalypse. Firefighter/paramedic in suburb of PHX had to transport a guy to the ER because he was constipated. His wife tried to dig it out with a wooden spoon. Spoon got stuck and had to move it. Walked in and there's a 250-pound man, butt naked, lying on his side with a huge wooden spoon stuck halfway up his butt. That is not why he had a spoon up his butt. Me and my dad are both firefighters, and he said one time they went to a house because an elderly man could not get out of the leather recliner because he had been sitting in it for a week straight, and his wife would just serve him drinks/food and the guy never got up. He would just get drunk and urinate/defecate himself until he was physically stuck to the chair and they had to cut him out. 2 bikini-clad girls had to be rescued from a swift-moving river in a canoe. Neither girl brought a life vest or a paddle. Something shit creek. Had a drunk guy in Antarctica chase a penguin. Penguin stuck his beak through the offending drunk guy's calf. He got sent home, and a report on international treaty breach wound up on some Congress member's desk. Oak Murdo, how I miss thee. Wow, penguins are powerful. Dude picked up a metal ring from a hardware store in lieu of paying for an actual cock ring. It got stuck. He went to the hospital. The hospital called the fire department because a Dremel tool turned out to be the right tool for the job. You guys sure Dremel near the bait and tackle a lot. I use mine for small wood projects. I was a volunteer firefighter many years back. One summer, after a long period of no rain, 2 good old boys decide to have a few dozen beers and take their Jeep into a nearby field to go off-roading. Well, 2 feet tall corn stalks that are bone dry wind up getting jammed up into the undercarriage, which, on a 90+ degree day, turns out to be hot enough to ignite a fire. The owner of the field sees the situation unfolding from their house and calls for fire and police. Given the proximity to my location, I go directly to the scene after hearing the page go out and see these 2 assholes trying to drive the Jeep faster and faster to put the fire out. Eventually, the engine gives out, but they won't leave the car. I physically had to reach in, burning my arms in the process, Since I didn't respond to the station first to get my turnout gear and pull them out, somehow, they decided that remaining in the car would slow down the flames. And because they thought it was a good idea to continue driving a burning vehicle around a dry field, we now have a significant brush fire and have to call mutual aid from another county to help douse the fire. State police get involved. I have a nice trip to the hospital. And assholes lose their Jeep and the remainder of their booze. And assholes lose their Jeep and the remainder of their booze. And go to jail for trespassing and starting a brush fire, right? Former fire and rescue firefighter here. Have helped release several dogs and children stuck in the mechanism part of a recliner chair. Also a bird stuck in a tree, go figure. I remember asking a firefighter about this once, and he said a guy who was fucking a woman. Her husband came home, so he jumped out the second-story window buck naked and impaled himself through the upper leg on a fence paling. It was one of those fleur-de-lis ones, so it fucked up his leg pretty badly. They had to cut the paling out of the fence and load him into an ambulance. Obligatory, not a fireman, but they were most definitely involved. I used to work in a NYC public grammar school over the summers to pay for college back in the 90s. One of the full-time employees was a nice guy but stupid. And I don't mean he was slow or anything, he just did dumb shit because he was careless. One time he loaded up a trailer with like 25 gallons of gas and was driving it back through the main school parking lot. He didn't realize that container cracked open and spilled all 25 gallons in the parking lot. He didn't want to get in trouble, so he thought the best way to get rid of the evidence was to set the gas on fire. He didn't realize that burning gas gives off a lot of black smoke, and a gigantic cloud of black smoke coming from a school generally attracts a lot of attention from first responders. Panicking, he tries to put the flaming lake of gas out by driving over IT with his car. The fire department gets there, screaming at him to stop driving his car through flaming gasoline. They finally get the fire out and just screamed at this guy for like 25 minutes. It was the funniest thing I've ever seen. Had a fellow who was running from the police. He decided to climb on board a chunk of ice that was flowing down the river. I am sure he thought he was a genius at the time, but the issue is that there isn't really a whole lot north of our town for a few hundred miles, so his long-term planning wasn't great. Eventually we found him hiding in a small icy overhang on the side of the river suffering from hypothermia. After a brief stay in hospital he ended up being arrested. So no shit, there I was. Wavy ye oldie memory crossfade effect. We got a call about a little kid stuck in a bathtub. Nobody could make heads or tails of how a child can get physically stuck in a bathtub, so we rocked up in one of our engines and had a look. What had happened was that the child, almost 3 years old, had been left in the bath to play while it drained. The drain had a screw-down sieve in it, with 5 holes. Kiddo had 5 fingers, and must have thought it a good idea to jam them into said holes. Of course, they swelled up and got stuck. So now we had a kid attached to a bathtub drain, and no way to get at the screw holding him there. A buddy and me were sent down to get earplugs, a dog plushie, a spare helmet, safety goggles, an angle grinder, gas-powered, a large hammer. We filled the tub back up a bit, enough so kiddo's hand was covered in water for cooling. We gave him the plushie, with instructions to make sure it doesn't get wet, gave him earplugs and a real-life fireman's helmet TM, and went to town. 4 quick cuts around the drain hole, then bash in the tiles, and finally another cut through the drain. We then transported the boy/tub hybrid to the hospital for dehybridization, since the fingers had become quite blue, and we didn't want to induce tourniquet removal syndrome without access to proper medical care. The little guy joined the youth fire department as soon as he was old enough. We must have left a good impression.